Hey guys, this is Podfic, and today we're going to be reading The One Where the Justice League Almost Didn't Figure It Out by Bats and the Birds. The summary is, I can vouch for him, Cyborg said, sitting up straighter. We've worked together before. I can't promise he'd want the job, though. He works out of Bludhaven last time I checked. Dinah perked up from where she was slumped against the table next to Oliver. That's next to Gotham. Batman, what do you know? All eyes immediately turned to where Batman sat with his arms crossed, looking impassive as always. There was a long moment of silence, and then the corners of Batman's mouth turned ever so slightly downward. Finally, in a flat tone of voice that gave no more away than his face ever did, he said, He's well-trained. Fast. Could be useful. Also known as, the League eventually figured out that Nightwing is Batman's son. But it takes a while. Alright guys, and without further ado, let's hop right into Chapter 1. The bi-monthly League nominations were the bane of Oliver's existence sometimes. It wasn't that he didn't enjoy a good heated argument among the main League members, and he often added to them himself, but he could only listen to various superheroes bickering about the pros and cons of Booster fucking Gold so many times before he lost it. He actively had his head in his hands when the verdict was finally reached, and he sighed, slumping back in his chair. Right. Now that that's taken care of, Superman said, chipper as always. Does anyone else have someone to put forth? There was a flare of yellow lightning as Flash's hand shot up at inhuman speed, and Oliver could have strangled him. From glancing around at the other League members, he could tell that most of them shared that sentiment, except Batman. He just always looked like that. Yes, Flash, Superman said, his own smile faltering only slightly. Flash lowered his hand and almost seemed to second-guess himself momentarily before deciding to continue. Does this guy Wally works with sometimes? Nightwing. I can't say I know a ton about him, but I've worked with him a few times and he's good. Like, good. Completely human, but he's smart, good in a fight. He seems like a good person to have around. I can vouch for him, Cyborg said, sitting up straighter. We've worked together before. I can't promise he'd want the job, though. He works out of Bludhaven last I checked. Dinah perked up from where she was slumped against the table next to Oliver. That's next to Gotham. Batman, what do you know? All eyes immediately turned to where Batman sat with his arms crossed, looking impassive as always. There was a long moment of silence, and the corners of Batman's mouth turned ever so slightly downward. Finally, in a flat tone of voice that gave no more away than his face ever did, he said, He's well-trained. Fast. Could be useful. There was practically glowing praise from the Bat. Oliver was impressed, especially for someone he'd never even heard of. Is that official approval? Superman asked. After another long moment of stoic consideration, Batman gave a single nod. We could use more operatives equipped to handle stealth-based missions. Superman turned his attention back to Flash. And you think he's trustworthy? Barry shrugged. I watched him save Wally's ass from a rogue with a rather large hammer. I trust him. He's a good guy, Cyborg offered, and a good fighter. He's got a pretty good eye for tech, and he's terrifyingly quiet when he wants to be. His identity's locked up tight, but he's not the only one. Vic offered a pointed look at Batman. Sounds like this guy's gonna give Bats a run for his money, Ollie chuckled. There were a few other laughs from the other League members, but they died quickly when the gaze of Batman's white lenses fell on Oliver. This Nightwing. He seems mysterious, perhaps dangerous, but perhaps worth it, Wonder Woman said with a thoughtful look on her face, breaking the tension. It might be worth extending an invitation. There were general nods of approval that Oliver couldn't help but think wouldn't be happening if Batman hadn't given his rare stamp of approval. More than rare. Oliver didn't even think the stamp of approval existed before now. It felt like there were too many unknowns about Nightwing to even consider offering him a spot. But even Oliver found himself more inclined to agree. Well then, the invitation shall be extended, Diana smiled. I trust there are no other matters to be discussed, yes? This was Diana's way of saying that she wanted to leave, and if anyone else raised her hand, she was probably going to cause grievous bodily injury to them. Luckily, this subtextual meaning got across to everyone, and there were general words of agreement as everyone began to stand up and file out. The last thing anyone said of note was Flash as he stood up to go. I'll send Wally after Nightwing. I think he knows where to find him. Standing in the middle of the command center of the watchtower, Nightwing looked fairly unassuming. Oliver thought so, at least. He wasn't that tall, and while his skin-tight suit showed muscle definition, he was slim. The only visible weapons on him were a pair of skirma sticks on his back, and he couldn't stand still to save his life. In that way, he was much like the younger Flash, who stood next to the League's newest recruit, fidgeting at super speed. So this is the world-famous Justice League, Nightwing said slowly, carefully observing every member of the League that was there, much as they were observing him. Glad to be here, I suppose. He wasn't nearly as excited that new recruits usually were to be in the watchtower, Oliver noted. Hell, he wasn't nearly as excited as Oliver was the first time he'd seen the watchtower. Wally had spent at least 10 minutes running to every window he could find, and that was impressive at super speed. Are you guys gonna talk to me, or are you just gonna stare? The corners of Nightwing's mouth quirked up in a teasing grin. seemingly perfectly at ease in front of a group of the most powerful people on the planet. Superman floated forward, breaking out of the group of League members. Sorry, Nightwing. It's been a while since we voted in a new member, and I have to admit, information about you has proved elusive. Nightwing's eyebrows arched up and he cocked his head to the side, looking curiously at Superman. Is it now? I'm surprised. I was under the impression that you had a certain bat on your team that could do anything. His gaze shifted, almost imperceptibly, over to Batman, and his grin ticked up further on one side than the other. Anyhow, good thing Flash knew how to find me. He jerked his head towards the side slightly, indicating the younger Flash beside him, but his gaze, as far as Oliver could tell, behind the whiteout lenses of his mask, stayed fixed on Batman. Batman's facial expression never faltered, and he stared back impassively. Superman cleared his throat, bringing the attention back to him. Right, very good. For the time being, you'll be a probationary member. You'll have provisional Watchtower access. Provided you are accompanied by another League member, we'll send you on missions accompanied by senior members until we have a good idea of your abilities. And until you know you can trust me, yeah? Nightwing laughed. I'd guess that's part of it. That's all fair. I can't promise I'll always be available. My city still takes priority, but I'll try to make myself less elusive, was how you put it. Superman smiled, extending his hand for Nightwing to shake. Sounds good. Feel free to explore the Watchtower. Just stay with another member. Nightwing clasped Superman's hand as Wally came up behind the new recruit and threw his arm around his shoulder. I'll show him around, the younger Flash volunteered. Superman nodded and released Nightwing's hand. Of course. Welcome to the team. Provisionally, right? Nightwing joked, knocking against Wally's side. Happy to be here. Wally'll keep an eye on me, I'm sure. With that, the League members began to file out. Some stayed behind to greet Nightwing or shake his hand. Ollie caught sight of Batman standing at a distance, carefully watching the new recruit, but that wasn't that odd. Even with Batman's seeming approval, Oliver was sure that Nightwing would get put through the ringer before he earned his full membership. Once they were around the corner, Wally nearly doubled over laughing, practically hanging off of Dick with his arm still around his shoulder. Dude, are you gonna tell them? Walls, you've been having regular sleepovers at my house since you were 12. If your uncle hasn't figured it out yet, the rest of them have no hope. And I, for one, am amused. I don't actually need to show you around, do I? Nah, I helped B set up security for this place when I was like 14. I snuck through the ventilation system once. Besides, I stole the blueprints from his computer before I came up here. I bet I know this place better than some senior League members. Alright guys, that is the end of chapter 1 of The One Where the Justice League Almost Didn't Figure It Out by Bats and the Birds. I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you next chapter.